Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. The Ukraine War News Update, second one thereof for the 20th of March 2025. Just to remind you, I have a chat I'm really looking forward to with Malcolm Nance, former intelligence officer in the Ukrainian Armed Forces, as well as an intelligence operative in the US Armed Forces and on US media. So looking forward to that. But let's start this video with news that the 40 billion euro arms package for Ukraine from the EU is being withdrawn, unfortunately, and that's the EU High Representative for External Relations, Kaja Kallas. It looks like southern EU countries such as Spain and Italy have put up a bit of resistance to it. The effort is now to focus on delivering 2 million artillery shells. So we're hearing that Hungary, Italy, France as well, Spain and Portugal obstructed the initial 40 billion military aid plan. So now only 5 billion remains, and on a voluntary basis. Meanwhile, von der Leyen pushes for the Rearm Europe Defence Initiative. So all these separate things going on, like the Rearm, you got the $150 billion loan, I think, facility. Then you've got the ability to borrow all this other stuff. I think up to $650 billion. So together that's 800 billion, euros. And then there was going to be this separate 40 billion euro package to Ukraine. But alas, that seems, or at least according to La Stampa, an Italian source, that's now not happening. But it could be that $5.4 billion, so 5 billion euros, I presume, on ammunition for Ukraine could be a realistic goal for the EU now. Kaja Kallas is working on providing Ukraine with 5 billion euros for ammunition, and as a much larger 40 billion package has lacked that consensus. So it's a real shame, though, real shame. Really frustrating. I mean, that's a problem with the, not the EU, but any kind of group of very disparate entities coming together in a union, is that you need unanimous voting, essentially, in order to get these big monetary packages put together. EU provides $1 billion in aid to Ukraine, backed by frozen Russian assets. So this is more of the package of assistance, monetary assistance, that the EU has given. European Commission has disbursed an additional 1 billion euros in macro financial assistance to Ukraine to be repaid with proceeds from the frozen Russian assets. So that'll be useful for the Ukrainians, of course. Zelensky's announced the arrival of a new batch of F-16s to Ukraine. Don't know how many. Quote, the Russians are lying that they shot down something there. So yesterday, I didn't really report it, but there were reports from Russians that they shot down an F-16. In fact, fighter bombers come out today and pretty much denied it, or at least said that there's no confirmation that it's true. So I would fully dismiss that, and Zelensky has dismissed it. He said they didn't shoot down anything, and the good news is that several F-16 aircraft have flown to Ukraine. So this is, again, who knows, 2 or 3, maybe more. The news that a number of F-16s have been added to the fleet of F-16s in Ukraine. Don't know where they've come from, and I don't know how many, but that's good news. Right, so the US is finding what is available in response to Ukraine's request for more air defense systems. So this is a result of the telephone call between Zelensky and Trump that went fairly well, it seems. White House spokesperson Caroline Levitt has just read out a full White House readout from the Trump-Zelensky call. The most interesting line is that Ukraine Zelensky asked for additional air defense systems to protect his civilians, particularly Patriot missile systems. And Trump agreed to work with him to find what was available, particularly in Europe. So this is Trump strong-arming, I guess, other nations to provide stuff rather than the US. Other key points, Trump fully briefed Zelensky on his conversation with Putin. Actually, I won't go into all that stuff because that's more geopolitical stuff. But there could be more air defense systems coming, but that would, I think, be contingent upon European provision and not really American provision. Now, the UK is to host a closed meeting on Ukraine peacekeeping forces. Britain is convening military officials from over 20 countries. I don't know when this is, whether it's today or in the near-distant future, to advance Ukraine peacekeeping plans despite Putin's opposition. What I do like about European action at the moment is that it is action. There does seem to be, but you can say this is just talk, but actually this is I think this is more than just talk. This is putting practical things in place. This is the actual military leaders getting together and say, what does this actually look like? It's not the politicians talking about, yeah, we up for giving troops. Are we okay? Yeah, everyone's cool. Yeah, we're going to give some troops to Ukraine and then leave it at that. This is like, right, you guys are the people that are actually going to make this happen. Let's make this happen. And Starmer was talking about this the other day about how there needs to be actual things happening, and that does seem to be what is happening within Europe. So that's good news there. Now, British Special Forces have been put on standby to head to Ukraine as part of the UK's peacekeeping mission. Unmanned Systems Forces. That's something else. So this is just a summary of different points here from Max24. Now, this idea that the UK are putting the Special Forces, SAS and whatnot, on standby is, certainly true and whatnot. It's worth remembering that the SAS are over there and have been over there since before the war. Okay, so that's an absolute gimme, as I'm sure are many special forces from many countries around the world helping Ukraine, including the Americans, I'm sure. But the SAS definitely, I can tell you, they're over there. Shashank Joshi says, an important moment, quote, arms companies from the US, this is coming from the Financial Times, UK and Turkey will be excluded from the new 150 billion euro defence funding push. So that's what I was just referencing earlier, unless their home countries sign defence and security pacts with Brussels. Okay, so the US arms makers are being frozen out of EU's massive new defence spending plan, says Politico. Title of the article is EU slams the door on the US in colossal defence plan. Now, this is not looking good for the US, but it might be okay for the UK. Let's read a synopsis from Tendar, the Politico article. The European Union will allocate 65% of its massive defence spending plan to European countries, and this is part of their defence strategy that I talked about previously, that 65% of whatever is procured has to come from inside Europe, with a focus on EU countries, but also allied nations such as Norway and Ukraine. It also includes EU allied nations such as Japan, South Korea, Albania, North Macedonia, and Moldova. Turkey and Serbia might get access as well due to their EU accession process. The UK is at the moment not included, but EU authorities are currently hammering out a plan where London will also have opportunities. Canada has also made it clear that it wants a tighter security relationship with the EU, and the EU Commission has floated greater defence cooperation with Australia, New Zealand and India. So the USA, however, will be definitely left out, along with any other nation which curtails the usage of their weapons. This is unprecedented news when considering that in the past, 2/3 of European defence investments went to the USA. The USA under the Trump administration is obviously considered too unreliable, unpredictable and not trustworthy for future defence expenditures. The self-inflicted wound is a massive loss for the US industry. Now, the UK, as I reported yesterday, is looking at doing a security deal with the EU, and that will bring the UK closer to the EU, as many are now thinking is indispensable for economic growth for the UK. It looks like our next budget is going to be an austerity budget, which is just what we don't need. But I guess the Treasury is looking at the lack of alternatives. We are on a bit of a financial precipice, the UK, which is why we took from foreign aid to give to defence spending, because there's no money left in the coffers. And then we need to increase our defence spending over the next couple of years to get to 2027, then up to 3% in 2030 or something like that. So there's an awful lot of money that needs to appear from somewhere, and we need economic growth. And economic growth pretty much is going to be dependent on doing trade with the EU, our closest neighbours. That we need to be getting closer to them. So people are saying that one way the UK can get closer as a way into getting involved with the EU much more formally and informally is through a defence agreement. That will also unlock economic possibilities for UK manufacturers. So BAE Systems, etc., they will be desperate for us to do that deal with the EU so they can have an opportunity with that $150 billion worth of funding. Poland and the UK will explore joint defence spending initiatives to boost military production and efficiency amid growing security concerns in Europe, again, according to the Financial Times. The UK is also leading efforts to support Ukraine through a coalition of defence planners. So the UK is there or thereabouts. We're kind of at the centre of many things going on in Europe. That's Keir Starmer, I think, being pretty clever there. I was listening to Sir Richard Barron's, who's actually he was speaking highly of Starmer and what he's done in terms of Ukraine and support for Ukraine, but also being at the center of a bunch of stuff in Europe. We would definitely want a piece of that $150 billion if possible, and that will require that security arrangement. Now, Canada is in advanced talks with the European Union to join the bloc's new project to expand its military industry, a move that would allow Canada to be part of building European fighter jets and other military equipment in its own industrial facilities, according to the New York Times. And this is, again, concerning stuff like the F-35 order, where they've kind of tentatively ordered 88, but definitely 16, and they might cut the rest of them and then order, say, Gripens and Eurofighters or something instead. So they have some F-35s, but also have a more varied portfolio, so that they are, there were all these claims that the F-35s had these kill switches, or it's not. Then others saying, well, it's not necessarily kill switch, but it's the control over the information and the data and the maintenance and so on and so forth that Lockheed Martin have when these contracts get sort of sorted out. So we'll come back to that in a second. The other interesting nugget now, and I reported the news yesterday, but I was like, has this got anything to do with Trump's economic assault on Canada? So Canada have just announced that they're going to have this big radar cooperation with Australia, and they're going to get these over the horizon, or they mitigate the curvature of the Earth when detecting things like ballistic missiles, etc., and other stuff. Canada has stepped in and scooped up world-leading radical new radar tech from Australia that America was originally supposed to get first. So there is possibly more to this, as I hinted yesterday, that the US was supposed to be involved in this, and I don't know whether Canada have leapfrogged the US because everyone's kind of getting really uncomfortable about the positioning of the United States vis-a-vis national security and Trump's threats on pretty much everyone who's allied to him. But yeah, this is not putting the US, I think, in a good light, any of this kind of activity. And their industrial entities, their military industrial entities, are going to be lobbying the heck out of the White House right at the moment. So Danish MP Rasmus Jarlov has said, as one of the decision makers behind Denmark's purchase of F-35s, I regret it. The USA can certainly disable the planes by simply stopping the supply of spare parts. So it's not necessarily this kill switch. And you know that they're worrying about this kill switch situation at the moment that everyone's talking about, because literally Lockheed Martin has officially come out and denied there's a kill switch. There is no kill switch. The F-35 kill switch rumor has been debunked. After weeks of speculation, the Pentagon formally denies having the ability to remotely disable Lockheed Martin's F-35 jets. And actually, Lockheed Martin on Twitter has got, I could show you, they've literally formally come out and denied this. So, as Tendar says, trust in US military hardware has eroded that much that in the last 2 months, that even the official account of Lockheed Martin feels compelled to deny the existence of the kill switch in the F-35. So then going back to what the Danish MP was saying, the USA can certainly disable the planes by simply stopping the supply of spare parts. They want to strengthen Russia and weaken Europe, and are showing that they are willing to do tremendous damage to peaceful and loyal allies like Canada just because they insist on existing as a country. I can easily imagine a situation where the USA will demand Greenland from Denmark and will threaten to deactivate our weapons and let Russia attack us when we refuse, which we will even in that situation. Therefore, buying American weapons is a security risk that we cannot run. We will make enormous investments in air defense, fighter jets, artillery and other weapons in the coming years, and we must avoid American weapons if it is at all possible. I encourage our allies and friends to do the same. So that is coming from, very clearly, obviously, from a Danish MP that's involved in procurement of military hardware. And you go back to $150 billion, euros of money that will not be going to the US. The US has been pushed out here as a direct result of the Trump administration. These conversations would not have been taking place 2 months ago. Had the election been different, these conversations would not be taking place now, and these decisions would not be taking place now in the way that they are. This is an absolute 180 shift in direction in these domains of decision makers, and it's just incredible. I mean, again, Lockheed Martin must be pulling their hair out now. Like, hey, we were thinking we were going to have like crazy years at the moment due to the fact there's war in Ukraine and everyone's tooling up because they're afraid of Russia. And now everyone else is really peed off with the US. Now, India is swapping its aging Russian MiGs. What for? For sleek French Rafales from Dassault from France. France has now overtaken Russia as the world's second largest arms exporter, trailing only the US, while Russia's share keeps shrinking. So that, that's another data point there. The US, yeah, okay, the F-35 is probably the best in the world at certain things, but like I said yesterday, there are different metrics of success, and the F-35 is incredibly expensive and is a stealth fighter that at a time when actually you might not need stealth. There are lots of arguments for and against, like the F-35, but if money wasn't an issue and supply chains and this and that, then actually F-35 is probably going to be your choice. But there are so many other ways to use planes and so many other variables to take into account, cost of course being one of them. Now, it's got to the point where the US is not only doing things that is challenging its military industrial base, but it's also changing its structures around an organization in the Department of Defense, for example. So purging lots of generals and admirals, getting rid of the attorneys general, and then possibly getting rid of what at the moment I think is General Cavoli. What is happening in Europe with regard to NATO and the US being supreme commander of NATO in Europe, that's probably going to stop. Let's talk about maybe Japan changing as well. I was reading something just about half an hour ago. Loads of organizational shifts. It's now got to the point where the GOP, so Republican chairs of the Senate and House Armed Services Committee, have issued a joint statement in response to the below story, indicating that Trump DOD wants to significantly restructure the combatant commands. Quote, "We will not accept significant changes to our warfighting structure that are made without a rigorous interagency process, coordination with the combatant commanders and the joint staff, and collaboration with Congress. Such moves risk undermining American deterrence around the globe and detract it from our negotiating positions with America's adversaries." Absolutely right. You can't just unilaterally, well, you shouldn't be able to, unless you're in a dictatorship, decide to change how the military kind of fundamentally operates, how it's organized, and therefore how, what the military strategy of the whole nation is, without speaking to the experts and speaking to Congress and lawmakers. Rigorous interagency process needs to take place. We need to you can't just go, oh yeah, we're going to do that now. You need to have okay. There are complaints we can make about having too many investigative. I don't know, groups set up, or we're gonna have an interagency look at how this happens, and we're gonna have a working group doing this and a working group doing that, and we're gonna look into this, and nothing ever gets changed. Okay, that's one extreme. The other extreme is you don't have any of that, and you just make unilateral decisions without any justification, any formal kind of rationale. It's just like, oh, I'm doing this because I'm the Trump administration. So you've got to have some kind of, as stated here, rigorous interagency process, coordination with the combatant commanders and the joint staff, and collaboration with Congress. That seems eminently sensible. So are we starting to see some kickback from prominent Republicans concerning what the Trump administration is doing? Because at the moment, the US is vulnerable to lose some big ticket contracts concerning a lot of kit. And they might be also losing their prominence around the world. I mean, if you want to remove yourself from Europe, as I keep saying, and not have such NATO presence, not have all your bases set up there, then with that, you are receding from your influence on Europe, your influence on the world, your influence. Well, you are moving your strategy from being one that is kind of globalist and looking to influence what goes on to isolationist, and therefore you can't whinge about what's going on around the world if you've receded from the world. So this is something that needs to be discussed very thoroughly by those entities aforementioned. But again, these unilateral decisions make the US look more and more like it's moved already to a form of authoritarian autocracy. Anyway, enough of me waffling on. Take care, guys. I'll speak to you soon. Please check out the NAFO campaign we're running with Rick the Ukrainian and Roman Trakomets. 62% at the moment. Need to get that up. Fantastic. Already what has been pledged, almost 50,000 between the three of us, 50,000 euros. And obviously we'd love to close that out and get that done. So thank you to all of those who have so generously donated. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.